So now it's my great pleasure to moderate the panel. So for those who don't know me, I'm Ben Glocker. I'm a researcher at Imperial College London, and I have the honor to have three panelists. So you all have seen Leo already, hopefully, in the keynote, but I would like to give the other two a quick chance to introduce themselves. Ghada, do you mind starting and do a quick introduction?
Yes, thank you, Ben, and thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Ghada Zamzmi. I'm currently a regulatory science principal in HeartFlow. For those who don't know the company, it's a cardiac AI company. So my role here in the company is in the middle between research and regulation, working with the research team to make sure our entire research is regulatory driven. Before that, I worked at the FDA as a medical AI reviewer, and I also worked at the NIH as a research scientist for a few years. And I'm happy to be here talking with everyone about bias and fairness. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much also for taking the time. I think your expertise will be particularly useful in this panel. We'll touch upon some regulatory aspects. Over to you, Eike, if you mind doing a quick introduction.
Yes, sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Eike. I am a research scientist at the Fraunhofer Institute for Digital Medicine, MEVIS. So Fraunhofer, for those who do not know, is a translational research organization. So we do applied science. And I have a history of working in bias and fairness for medical imaging. I'm also a co-organizer of FAMI. Yes, I think that's the short version.
Excellent. Thank you, Eike, also for joining this. And Leo, I would like to start with you. I hope I don't need to introduce you again, but I know you were quite keen to answer some of the questions that you couldn't at the end of your keynote, and they will be quite relevant. And I actually had them already on my list for the panel anyway, so I'm glad someone asked. Which the first question is a little bit about your view that you gave and your perspective, which maybe some people could have seen a little bit pessimistic. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a bit of a question around, are we in the area of damage control using AI in healthcare, or is there hope? What's kind of give us your optimistic view on the field?
I am much more optimistic now than I've ever been in my life. And I could describe or I could explain why that is. So a lot of our work, a lot of our initiative is going around the world and creating microsystems of collaboration. So what we do pretty much is to bring in one room students across all spectrum, from high school students all the way to lifelong learners like us, coming from different fields. And we do this from country to country. And what we realize very quickly is that critical thinking is actually very easy to teach. All you have to do is to bring people who don't think alike together, and suddenly it magically conjures in front of your eyes. But you have to establish that there has to be a safety space for people to challenge each other's views. One thing that we're all very vulnerable to is echo chambering. And I think this is the reason why we haven't been solving problems, is that we surround ourselves with people who agree with us. And our group, for example, would deliberately look for devil's advocates, look for people who don't think like us. So as I mentioned earlier, we regularly converse with people from archaeology, space engineers, linguists, and then increasingly artists. So musicians, storytellers, because I think that this is the age of the three R's. It's reflect, reimagine, reanimate. And that has to be the grounding sort of tenet of what you're doing.
That's great.
Yeah, okay. So I'll stop.
I just want to pick up on this. I mean, you're basically describing what we need as a healthy discourse and with some disagreement in the room. Now, Ghada, I know from your work at the FDA, you must have had these conversations a lot, where people are pushing back on your recommendations or your requirements that you put maybe on companies trying to get their devices approved. Can you tell us about the kind of process of regulation? I mean, there must be a lot of kind of disagreement initially, but how do you make sure that you eventually converge to something?
Yeah, and thank you for allowing me to talk about this. So the process of regulating a medical AI product, it's actually very, very complex, and it involves people from so many fields. So the review team has 15 to 20 people, like only 2, 3 AI researchers. The rest are cardiologists, radiologists, doctors, people who have physics experience, medical imaging experience, and they all sit together. And just imagine how people who are coming from very different perspectives try to communicate with each other. And some people, they're more like me. I'm coming from the AI mindset, while I also have other people in the review team who are very senior regulatory scientists who really have very specific way of seeing things. Everything in their mind is about safety. And in their mind, AI models, they're not safe, they're data driven. So you cannot convince me this is safe. So you have, so with a group of people who really disagree with each other. And when I joined initially, it was very hard for me to sit in every meeting and realize I have to really work hard to convince them. But this is actually really good. It's the only way forward, like Leo said. If you sit in a table where everyone is agreeing with everyone, we're not going to move forward. We're not actually going to advance the field. We have to invite people who are different than us to sit with us, disagree with us, and allow us to see things. There is a lot of blind spots in our thinking, and we have to appreciate that some people, they see things differently, and they allow us to see these blind spots to open our eyes. So it's a very comprehensive, multidisciplinary process. It's not perfect. Sometimes regulatory people, they make mistakes. We're human. That's why FDA, they always have this open communication forum where they invite the research community to come collaborate with them, talk with them. The AI guidance, it's online now, it's open for comments. If you have any comments, if you disagree with the FDA and how they think about regulating AI products, you're more than welcome to really submit your comments, and they seriously take it into consideration.
No, that's great. That's a great invitation as well. And I've seen, I mean, there are a lot of kind of perspectives and even research articles jointly by FDA researchers together with academics, I guess. Eike, I would like to ask you, I mean, on the aspect of disagreement, you as a researcher, I mean, probably have reviewed quite a few papers. You have tried to publish a few papers successfully as well. I mean, there are some really, really nice ones. But this battle through peer review is also kind of where you disagree with people and you have to convince people. Can you tell us a little bit from your perspective and your experience, and also I think your perspective generally on kind of evaluation of fairness, evaluation of equitable performance? I know you have a great toolkit actually to help people to do this, but what are the big challenges? Where do you see kind of people get it wrong, and what would be your message to people getting into this field and trying to get it right?
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Oh, sorry, this was for Eike first. we can come back to you.
I'm happy to hear it. So okay, then I will start, and then yeah. I mean, my first message would be that it's great that people want to evaluate fairness. So that is a big success in and of itself, and I'm actually very happy to see many more people do this also in papers that are not specifically about fairness. So I think it's great that we see papers where the focus is not on fairness, but they still evaluate on subgroups. I think that is a big success already, and it shows that the fairness community has made some impact at least. I mean, then you quickly get into the very nitty-gritty technical details. There are some aspects of evaluation that are actually difficult to get right if you want to fairly compare between different groups. There are certain kinds of metrics that are commonly used for model evaluation, and they are fine for that, but they basically do not work for comparing groups of different sizes, different prevalences, different covariate distributions, and so on. There are complex statistical questions. I mean, groups will have different sizes. You have some small groups and some large ones, so you need to do proper uncertainty quantification. if you compare model performance across many different groups, you need to make sure that you are not getting a lot of false positives or false negatives simply because you do so many comparisons, right? So this is all like the bread and butter of statisticians, but it is not very commonly done very rigorously in the papers in our community. And I totally count myself in that camp as well. So if I look back at some of my earlier papers, we did some of these analysis, and I think it was fine the way we did it. But in hindsight, I would do some of these comparisons more rigorously to make sure that we are actually reliably detecting whether models are underperforming on certain groups. The final thing I would maybe say, which is something that you also published on very successfully, is this accounting for differences in covariates. So I think this is really crucial. We cannot reasonably compare between, say, men and women if they differ in all sorts of other aspects, such as age or insurance status or being recorded on different devices and so on. If in the end we want to say this model is performing better or worse on men and women, then we need to account for this kind of variation. Yeah. So there are certain technical aspects that one needs to get right to make good statements about whether a model is actually working equally well for different groups. Yeah. And I think as a community, we have some work to do here to make sure that we analyze this in a proper way.
No, these are great points. Going back to you, Ghada, I know that, I mean, in the regulatory context, you are asking people to demonstrate equitable performance, right? So it is already a requirement to sometimes show that you have equitable performance across relevant subgroups. But how much guidance is there being given? Like, is it then up to the AI developer to say what are the relevant subgroups, or how much prescription do you give there?
So I don't think there is guidance except that FDA for medical AI devices require company to provide subgroup analysis to show that their tool works across all the relevant subgroup, and what are these subgroups are task specific. So what's like in some scenarios, like gender is very relevant subgroup that you need to show your model is work across both the gender equally. But in another application, gender maybe is not really a very important group. So you have to think about it from like the application perspective. What are the important factors in my application? And in order to list these specific groups, you need to work with clinician. You need to ask them, like, is there any published evidence that's, so for example, in cardiovascular disease, we know like race is a big factors, like cardiovascular disease is more relevant in Hispanic Black people than in white people. So this will be an important subgroup for this specific application. But then I also want to mention that FDA doesn't see fairness the same way how we see it in the research community. So in the regulatory world, fairness lives in the risk-benefit framework. So we don't focus on fair performance, we focus on fair outcomes. You can have really very equal performance across subgroup, but if the outcome is worse for one group than the other group, I don't think this is something that they will be happy about. So we need to focus more on the outcome. What does this mean for the patients? And we need to make sure we minimize the harm for the most like vulnerable group. It's not just about making sure the performance is equal.
Oh, these are great points. Leo, if I can come back to you, because you did mention during your keynote that we need to move away a little bit from benchmarking to really look at what happens when you deploy these models. And that relates to Ghada's point about the health outcomes as well. What is the solution there? We currently work from often publicly available data sets that only have as much information as we can get from the papers that come with the data sets. Kind of, how do we find a way forward to actually look for the things that you also highlighted that we should look for?
Yes, I'm gonna push back a little bit when perhaps what we need to focus on are fair processes. So not fair, whatever, including outcomes, but making sure that the way we are developing and evaluating is fair. So it's moving away from the what and moving towards the who and the how. And I think that's where the FDA could do a lot of work. Can you show demonstration that you have engaged the patients who are most at risk of being harmed by your tool? Can you show demonstration proof that you engage them in fleshing out the idea, in making sure that this is really a problem that is fixable with whatever you are developing? So people come up with their North Star. What if the North Star is your day-to-day activities? Of course, this kind of blows people's minds away because we're hardwired to think of outcomes, KPIs. And I think this is our Waterloo. This is our downfall, is we're trying to shoehorn AI in very broken systems, systems for education, systems for innovation. I push students to really think about doing things that the rest of the machine learning community is not doing. So just because you read it on Nature Medicine doesn't mean that that's what you need to be doing, because all they do is they tweak something else. And it's not their fault. We created these monsters. We are the monsters. So somehow, how do you, because one of the question is, how do you even uh, promote creativity? Rather than prescribing how do you promote creativity, I would say that the way to promote creativity is, one, what I've heard here is epistemic humility, understanding that we could all be wrong because we never experience the whole universe of experiences. And that's what you need to do to be able to create fair AI. So it's a very different way of thinking. And you could tell I've been influenced by feminist philosophers. Always think of who gets left behind by the day-to-day things that you're doing and focus on that. So I challenge the group. Again, don't latch on to what we have right now. I always say that the masters, I don't know who said, it's Audrey something. The master's tools cannot destroy the master's house. You cannot trap OpenAI using Health Bench because they optimize their products on Health Bench. So why are the students using Health Bench to evaluate large language models? That's not the way to do it.
So on that, I mean, you did talk about, when you mention industry, I always sometimes get a little bit the impression you're taking industry as kind of the enemy. But obviously we do see also great successes. I mean, I think it's undeniable that there are AI products out there that are now starting to work, right? So Ghada might comment on that, but where do we see the role of industry? I mean, taking OpenAI and others maybe for a moment, not as kind of health tech companies, but let's look at real health tech companies, for example, or people at the intersection, like people like Eike, who are kind of somewhere in between, kind of maybe working towards commercializing something, but still sitting in a research environment. Often people try to do good, right? So I would say, how do we kind of encourage that? And that goes back also to the question, what are the resources that we can provide? Eike, I don't know if you immediately want to comment on that, but how do you make sure that, for example, people that we train, people that want to get into the field, actually not all of them will go to the point of having a clinical trial and asking for regulatory approval. But before that, how do we make sure they can do the right thing?
Okay, so I will maybe say a few words about how I got where I am and then circle back to your questions because I think it's relevant. So not so long ago, I was one of the persons that Leo was talking about in his keynote earlier, where he was like, people take a data set and then they try to predict a label. That was basically me. So I had some medical background, but basically not much more knowledge about this particular field I was trying to work in. And in hindsight, so when I moved to Fraunhofer, I was like, okay, great. Now I'm going to take all the things that I did in academia and I will like apply them in industry. And I will certainly not be the first person to realize this, but that's not how it works. So I quickly had to realize that in industry, people care about very different problems, and many of the things that we work about at MICAI and all these other venues are not super relevant. Partially because we all work on these same benchmark data sets. So it turns out if you talk to clinicians and radiologists and medical device manufacturers, they actually have different problems that are quite different in nature and that are very specific. There is no benchmark data set for that available. You are predicting a very specific thing that few papers have been written about. maybe it's technically not super interesting in a certain way, right? It's just like a new application, and you have to craft a very specific solution to this very specific problem. And I think that actually is reflective of what Leo has also been saying, and Ghada as well. Like when you get into the room with the people who are actually intended to apply this, it turns out that you learn a lot about what you need to build. And if you don't do that, then you don't build something useful. So that was certainly a very interesting learning experience for me. I still like the academic research, but I now try to focus on the parts where I know that they are actually practically relevant, because I talked to applied people who tell me that this is a problem that they have. So it kind of reoriented my personal focus a little bit.
No, thanks, Aiken. And I mean, maybe to some degree, we all have to go through these stages, right? Because I mean, there's also a training aspect, right? So I often think that some of the papers where you think, okay, what is kind of the real world impact? Maybe the exercise was to train the person who did the work rather than solving a real world problem. Ghada, maybe to bring you in as well. And I hope I'm not unfair to put you kind of in a unique spot here in a way that you had been on the regulatory side, you are now on the industry side. And I assume you have conversations about the kind of co-creation of AI. You get customer feedback. How do you deal with kind of having kind of opposing views, but also then obviously everyone eventually wants to create something that improves healthcare and patient outcomes?
Yeah, so the majority of my life I was in the research world, and actually the reason I decided to move to FDA because we got a patent from the NIH that we deployed in Johns Hopkins, and it worked perfectly well. We tried it for predicting sickle cell disease on 400 patients. We went to Africa, to Kenya. We deployed it. It failed. And then it was just an eye-opening experience to me that you can build the best technology, you get a patent, and then the moment you go to another country and then deploy it, things don't work anymore. So I moved to the regulatory side. And then I'm really thankful for my experience there. Like I worked with more than 50 company, all like startup, like they're trying to build medical AI company. And I have to say that a lot of these companies, they really want to do things right. They just don't know how to do things right because the entire research team, like everyone in the company, they're coming from technical background or marketing business background. So, or like clinicians. So like they need help. They want to understand, okay, I have these resources. Now show me how I make sure I build a product that will not harm patients, because like companies, like they don't want, like one of their goal is to build products that they can be used safely in their end users. So so I would say like a lot of people in industry, they have good intention, they want to do things right, but they don't know how to do it. And the data and benchmarking is also a huge issue. Like a lot of company now, if they want to build a product, one of the biggest obstacle they have, they don't have the right data set. The data set right now, that the one we have, it's for research purposes. It's not really for them to build a product. So like this is also one issue. And then now I work with a company and I can see that the process actually to build a medical AI product is very complex. There's a lot of factors. There's a lot of stakeholders. There is the clinician point of view, like they have their need that you need to focus on, but there is also some practical needs. There is some regulatory needs, and you have to really try to understand all of them. But I think really a lot of company, at least like a lot of startup company in the US, the one I worked with, like they're really trying to do things right. They just don't know how to do it.
Excellent, great. Yeah, thanks, Ghada. So do we need probably someone like Leo creating a consultancy company so people can call and talk? Leo, on your points that you mentioned, the ones also you just put in the comments, I don't know if they're visible for everyone, but give us your last kind of 20, 30 seconds, kind of where do you see, kind of what is the thing that people should focus on? I know you are worried about the good intention is not enough, but I get having good intention at least is a good starting point, isn't it?
It is. And I would push people who are listening now to have these discussions and start small. People always get intimidated by how big the problem is. but you cannot try to dismantle academia. It's not going to work. But start within your own small organizations, your classroom, your clubs or whatever, and try to have these debates and dialogues. Bring in people that you don't normally invite to the table. And I really think it could be delusional, but I think that this will deliver what we want from AI.
That's great. Thanks, Leo. Thanks, Ghada. Thanks, Eike, so much for taking the time to discuss with us. I know we are running out of time, but I think this was a good closing remarks on the panel. And now I'm handing back to Melanie for some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I just want to quickly make some announcements. So first of all, we wanted to share again that we have a Melba special issue on FIME topics going on, where some of the papers that were presented today and some of the mechanisms, how we can examine our algorithms are described. So please check that out if you want to. Then we also have a YouTube channel with all the previous online events we've had, but also with recordings of the Mikai workshop and the ISPI tutorial. And we will also cut and edit these talks from today and put them online. So check out the YouTube channel. And you can also sign up for our newsletter. You just follow the QR code or you go on our webpage and fill out the form there. And finally, we started a community Slack last year because we wanted to bring, exactly like Leo asked us to, people with different backgrounds together from all parts, make it a low accessible place to chat, to discuss research, or like Eike just recently did, share some new tools to examine your data and your algorithms. So check out our Slack. We will also try and post a sign up for the Slack in the next newsletter. So in this way, you will be able to access it. And with this, thank you all for attending. Thank you very much for all our panelists and speakers. It was a pleasure to have you here. If we have time to answer questions in the chat, feel free so. And otherwise, we'll hope to see you again next year.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you.